Hey y'all, good morning or good afternoon, whatever time of day it is when you're watching this. I hope you're having a good day so far. I wanted to bring a message to you all that's a little bit different way to look at the hero's journey. And this is something that I feel like was revealed to me the other day. I took some notes yesterday, but I was too tired to film last night. So I'm going to go ahead and do it today. But I hope you enjoy the message. When I was a little kid, I remember being in my backyard, my parents' backyard, looking up at the sky and just knowing, I wasn't thinking or trying to figure anything out. I just remember looking up and just knowing from my child's perspective, right, that the sky above us was like a bowl. In my mind, I remember saying, I wonder if and or when God would ever lift up the bowl of the sky and just kind of peek down on us, just like, how's it going down there? And so the thing about that is this. I think that all of us at some point, likely in our childhood, but maybe multiple times throughout our life, maybe even frequently, we sense that there's something more, specifically with regards to the spiritual realm, to the Creator, things like that. And so, that's going to be central to our message today. So the hero's journey, it's one thing to consider it just psychological development, the typical route that most humans go through as far as developing their psyche, on this life's journey. That's one thing. But the spiritual element is another. And I think that this is what comes through in beautiful, creative, imaginative ways in all of these fairy tales and folklore. And there's a whole lot I could say about that, because I do believe that there are many, many things that are considered today to be fiction. I think that we correlate or relate fairy tales and folklore with fiction. And the funny thing is, if you look at really old books and just even news articles that are not that long ago, it's amazing to me how there are things that are recorded that seem to be presented in a way in these old books and old newspapers. They all seem to be recorded as people's firsthand accounts and what they saw and experienced and things like that. And there wasn't so much of this, not just censorship, because I think that's been all throughout time, truthfully, censorship. Heavier even sometimes in the past. But I think that my point here is that people didn't hesitate to share what they experienced or saw or went through or whatever, and so much so that they were okay with it being published in the paper, being interviewed and published in the paper, or writing a book about it. They had no reservations about that, and so does this mean that these people were just out of their mind? It's a fun little journey, to consider the unknown, and to at least consider things that are beyond what we feel like are facts nowadays. But what I want to say is this: these stories that have morphed and evolved throughout time and manifested in different ways, with little changes, but essentially the core of the story remains the same, right? They're truly treasures, whether they are 100% imaginative or I'm not saying all of them, like I'm saying a random one that you may find, whether it's 100% imaginative or 100% truthful and we're just dismissing it completely, or maybe there's a little bit of truth and a little bit of fiction, you know, who knows. But at the core of these stories is an interest, at the very least, in this element of there being more to this human experience than meets the eye, right? And that there's something valuable in that. You know, when I'll give you another example from my childhood. So growing up, I didn't get to go on a lot of vacations with my parents, but they didn't. Well, we didn't as a family. Like, we just didn't go very many places. It's not like they went and didn't take me, but I remember being about 4 or so, and we went to the beach, and I sat on the beach right next to the ocean, and it came up over me, over my head, and all I remember is it was like a flash, and then it, you know, it retracted, and I was, you know, having to get up and like cough and everything. But in that quick little moment, I swore that I saw a mermaid. I saw it. And so you know, it gets into the concept of how much of this reality do we really create, you know, ourselves. Because if you want to see something really bad, you're going to see it, or if you believe something so much, you're going to manifest it, you know, into objective reality, then other people can see it. Or maybe it just manifests through your perception and your subjective reality, and other people can't see it and they think you're crazy. That's fun for me to speculate all this stuff. I'm at a stage right now on my journey, on my walk, that I don't go into black and white thinking anymore. I don't try to make a decision that it has to be one way or the other. I think that it's more of a gray area. I think it's a blend, the truth. I think that paradox is a real thing, and I think that solves a lot. You know, when you come out of a tough situation, y'all know I like to just sum things up and say that, right? And your perception of reality has been totally rocked, totally. And your, up till that point, decades long held beliefs and understanding of the world that's consistently been reflected back to you as accurate, you know, because the world is like a mirror, you know. It's like it's reflected back to you as accurate, you know, or so you think. Your perception is showing that to you, kind of like a reality check every day, right? And then one day there's an unveiling. The fog clears, however you want to say it, okay? And then at this point, it's shocking to the psyche. And I think that right there is what catapults a lot of us into questioning literally everything. So I just want to pause here and say, don't be hard on yourself, and be careful with who you consult on your healing journey, because people, I think even if they have good intentions, they will unintentionally just either slow down your progress on your healing journey, or they will cause more damage, even if they mean well, because they're, you know, their walk isn't your walk. And so just be careful with that. But and I do think help is good, but just be careful. So, but that's what catapults us into questioning everything. And for me, you know, I've got this background in art, and so I have always had an interest in creativity and imagination. And I've also had, just right alongside that, my whole life, a great interest in mysteries, the great mysteries, you know, just watching all these shows on TV. You know, I grew up without cable until I was in my late teens. I think we got it then. We got like satellite TV. But all growing up, you know, it was just like anything that was not the news or like this standard sitcom was usually on PBS, you know. And so but anyway, and I was very thankful that there was there was at least some shows out there that made you think. And so I grew up watching, you know, shows like that where they sent people out to the pyramids, you know, and you got to, you know, see the footage of the pyramids and hear these historians explain, you know, the history of certain areas all around the world, Easter Island, all these different things like that. So I've always had a great interest in and love for mysteries and the remnants of civilizations in the past. And it's always fascinated me why we have to guess. It's kind of like, if I understand that there's been war, I get it, all throughout history, but why not, or why has there not been more preserved about how things were built and why things were built and what this or that was for, you know, so that we don't have so many gaps and we have to speculate. That's strange to me. And so that kind of cued me into, there could be, you know, more that we should consider, specifically with regards to a natural cycle, you know, with the earth and weather and space weather and all of it. There may be some kind of cyclical or cyclical event that that may have affected all of these great and wonderful and seemingly very, very advanced civilizations from way in the past, and then we're just left with very little, just these little remnants to try and put the pieces of the puzzle together and figure it out. I love it. I love all that. So I don't love that something awful happened to them, obviously, but I love that we at least have those remnants. And so it's just fun. It's just fun. And I think that it's really important on this life's journey to have fun. Whatever your interests are, you know, it's all about how you approach them, you know. But I think all of us have a core set of operating principles. And for a lot of us, right in the heart of that core set of principles is a love for truth and honesty and transparency. And so, because we understand that nobody's perfect, everyone makes mistakes, but that's a choice to be transparent and honest, you know. And then others, I don't know, I can't really figure out what their core set of principles are, if they even have any, as far as their operating, like how they operate. But it's like, it seems to be the very opposite of that, and I just, for the life of me, can't make sense of it. But anyway, I just, on your healing journey, try to have some fun. Try to have some fun, and just, I encourage you to consider that as you're researching things, either trying to figure out what you went through, or either, you know, things that are of interest to you, like old civilizations and the remnants or whatever, just consider, you know, do like a self-check along the way. Am I going into black or white thinking? I think that we're all kind of conditioned, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but to do that, to have black and white thinking and making a hard determination, drawing a line and saying, well, it has to either be fact or fiction, or it has to be this or that, when what if it's a little bit of both, you know? It's kind of like, I never want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. So and also just really making sure that I am trusting my own direct experience. That's crucial. I saw a short video the other day. I can't remember who recommended it, but it was really good, and it was talking about how easily we can be gaslit into not trusting what we see with our own eyes. It was like a 1-minute video, just like a speaker at a presentation. If I can find it, I'll drop the link in the description. But we don't realize it. We don't realize that we can be so quickly and easily persuaded to go with what somebody that we deem as having some type of authority, at a higher level than us. It's like, it's a good indication of a humble heart, and that's good, but it's not good also that we completely just, subjugate ourselves in that kind of situation and let this other person tell us what our reality is instead of seeing it for ourselves. So there's that. But in the hero's journey, it's let me start by saying this. I've shared with y'all before, there's a test that was performed in the 60s or 70s, I believe, where they had mothers. God, somebody's got their boombox going back there in the car. Just boom, boom. Sorry if you can hear that. But there were mothers who were asked to not interact with their infants. They just remained kind of stone-faced, I think, and just they didn't, what they call, mirror back, like in natural engagement with their children, which is awful to me. I don't even know that I would do that I know I wouldn't. I know I wouldn't do that even to participate in science, because what are the implications on your child for that experiment? But anyway, I'm not trying to pass judgment, but still. Whew. But the children, were just, innocent, little kids, and they were, laughing and smiling at their mothers, and instead of the mothers smiling back at them, they just were supposed to be like, I guess, robotic and stone-faced. And so the outcome, per my what I'm able to recall, is that it was very traumatic for the children. And the point made through this experiment is that we, in our very, very early stage of development, we need to have our existence reflected back to us. It's like to have another person react and engage with us, basically correspond to us. That tells that little infant that they are no longer in the spiritual realm, but they have been birthed into the human realm, that they're here and they can be seen and heard. So it tells them that. It validates their existence. And so it's crucial. And so we can understand that people who had mothers who didn't do that, who didn't engage with them, it's like they didn't get that very first stage of development checked off. And so it's almost like they're not really in touch with reality. They're here, they grew up, but they're not really even in touch with the reality, because they didn't have that mirroring, that necessary, which is supposed to be natural mirroring. But if a mother's traumatized or whatever she's got going on, selfish, whatever, and I think that can be passed down as generational trauma, see, if it never gets checked and corrected within a family. But it creates like this void, supposedly, in this person as they grow up. And so they're kind of like always hungry, always needing, like a vampire. It's that vampire type energy, right? Where they're never fulfilled. And so these are the people that we become friends with, people that we sometimes marry, people that we work for, that we work with, that are our neighbors, sometimes in our own family. These are the people that we try and try, but they're never satisfied, because that void can never be filled. To an infant, they idolize their mother without calling it such, without slapping that kind of label on it. They essentially, the mother is like a godlike entity. It's that crucial in their life that they, and I'm sure the father too, but historically I've seen studies on the mother, but that's their role. Their role is supposed to be a mirror. They're supposed to be a mirror. And so it kind of like, it's almost like an initiation ritual to that little baby psyche, to make sure that they understand, oh, now I'm actually in the human realm and I exist here as a physical being. So I think that when we look at the hero's journey, I'm totally not going off my notes whatsoever. I've written down some steps, okay? Typically in a lot of fairy tales, myths, folklore, all this stuff, there's like an outline. I don't know the proper term, theatrical term, whatever, for this stuff. But the first step is that in these stories, the hero's journey type stories, the parent usually dies, or they fail in some way, or both parents die, or they make a really bad decision that affects the whole family and just uproots their contentment or their place of their home or whatever. There's some kind of something caused by the parent, or the parent or parents die, okay? And then the hero winds up, usually they're a child, which is very, very symbolic, and they're wandering, they're lost. They start their journey. And then along their journey, usually pretty quick into the story, they meet helpers. These can be real helpers, people. It could be even their counterpart that they wind up marrying later. It could be a non, what do you call it? I'm at a loss for words today. But a non-living being, like a doll. But yet in the story, there's this element of magic and numinosity, where there's a spirit within this inanimate object, like a doll or whatever. So there's oftentimes in these stories, it's magical. You're going to meet fairies, you're going to meet angels or ghosts or gnomes or whatever it is. And so, but the hero meets helpers. And so they continue their journey with these helpers. Now, the next part is that they go through trials and tests. I've always perceived this as the hero being tested, but this is my new perspective, my new lens. I've made a switch. It just came to me like an unveiling. And that is, it's not so much the hero that's tested, but the relationship between the hero and their helpers that is tested. And so, because the tasks they've been given, or the challenge before them, is one that they both face together as a team. So, of course, it's the relationship of the hero, and it's kind of like the parent figure that was in relationship with them. That's gone now for whatever reason. And then they're stumbling in the darkness, so to speak, for a little bit, and then along comes the helper, okay? And then at this point, the story really kind of amps up. It's very... the excitement is amplified at this point, and it's just really this is where we're really starting to get engaged in it. Things are taking off, so they're facing their challenges together. To me, that means the relationship is being tested. Now, during this testing process and all the challenges they face, which is like at the heart of these stories, right? That's when the relationship between the hero and their helper, or their new best friend, or their counterpart, or whoever it is they're with, that relationship becomes cultivated and refined and deepened in all of this because of the testing, okay? And then I'll give you an example. In the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, Vasilisa, there's a story in there called Vasilisa, and she's got a little doll in her pocket from her mother who passed away, and the doll is her helper. And so she's consulting with the doll while she's at the witch's house, and the witch just gave her all these crazy, impossible jobs to do, like overnight. And the doll tells her, I got this. You go to sleep and rest. I've got this. So there's this element of trust. This is when trust becomes, enters the scene, becomes part of the relationship, right, between the hero and their helper. And then the last stage is that the relationship becomes solidified and the testing is complete. The testing is typically portrayed as being like an underworld type testing. And then when the testing is complete, they re-enter the topside world, what's sometimes referred to as the topside world, or they come out of the forest or the dark woods, or come up from underground, literally, it's just portrayed in so many different ways in these stories. So what's interesting is the testing, like I said, happens in the underworld. What does that represent? Essentially, it's seclusion. It's like being in a cave. It's a separation from the rest of the world, okay? But they're with their helper, okay? This is represented in the stories like, entrances into trees, going down through the root system, in the ground, and there's a whole civilization down there. just a whole new world. Sometimes they're in a cave, sometimes they're and they find a cabin in the woods, or it's nighttime, or there's fog or something. Again, the topside world is rejoining the rest of humanity. So we'll visit that again here in a minute. So why the dying off or the abandonment of the parents in the beginning, right? This could represent dying to the world. In other words, our old ways that we trusted up till this point fail now. And then when they go into the underworld, start their journey with the helpers, or meet the helpers, this is, to me, akin to like hibernation. It's like going into their protective seclusion. You know, animals do this when they're injured or they're really tired. They'll want to just go away, and especially if they're about to die, they'll want to do it alone. They go and find a place to be alone. They disappear, essentially, you know, for a while. And that's just a critical element, because it's a transformative thing, and they know that. Instinctively, they know that they're about to transform into the spiritual realm when they're about to die animals. And so there's importance here to be secluded during this disappearance, okay? So hibernation is also a disappearance for a while. And in looking up the word hibernation, the etymology, it's the act of passing the winter. It also means the dormant condition of animals. So you might consider going into the heart of these stories, you know, the testing and the trials, or the dark forest, or the wandering stage, you know, of a person's life is like a long winter. The act of passing the winter. So the Proto-Indo-European root word of winter is Gheim, Gheim, and it's related to hibernation, Himalaya, snow, and chimera. And that was pretty interesting. I didn't know. I had heard of the word chimera before. It's related to a monster of Greek mythology. Just kind of interesting. So, and I've heard a lot of notes on that. Maybe I'll drop that down in the comments for you all if you have interest there. But I want to go back to the importance of correspondence and engagement between mothers and their infants, okay? So correspondence is kind of like mirroring, right? It's an engagement. You know, if you let's take a quick look at what it means to correspond versus to reflect, like a mirror. So to reflect back someone's existence, or to agree with them, validate them, whatever, right? To reflect means to turn or bend something back. This is the act in the start of these stories and in the start of our lives. This is the act of birthing one's ego, birthing that child's ego. It creates their little self, their little I, me, ego. It creates that. And then, as far as official definitions, correspond means to be in agreement, to answer together. So that is not so much reflecting, but it's a togetherness. To correspond is a togetherness, right? Now what's interesting is, when we're talking about these people who seem to have this vampire type energy, and they're just kind of like a walking void, I could go way off on a tangent, but I won't. I sort of say, you know, it's easy when you have empathy to want to not give up on these people. And if you, even without, you know, knowing all the technical terms or whatever, which I don't, you sense that there's something missing, and you care, and you want this person to feel whole and healthy. And that right there, your empathy can be the hook that keeps you there. And you don't realize that you're being brought down to that vampiric or vampiric, whatever, energy is having a great effect on you, a negative effect on you, until you get to the point where you just, even without evidence, you know, right then, you may feel like you have to leave. But as far as reflection and correspondence, it's required for a person to have had their little self, their ego, birthed through this reflection process, this mirroring process with a parent in the beginning. That is first required to be established before they can correspond to another person, engage with, truly connect with. That's why they can't connect with anyone, because their ego hasn't even been created, because they didn't get that. They didn't go through this initiation type process in their very, very early childhood. Yeah. Now, if someone's parent does mirror, or if their mother, if a person has a mother that does her job and mirrors back their presence, right, then the next step is that their little ego, their little I self has been born, it's been birthed, and they move forward with it. And of course, it's new, it's a baby ego, and they're having to stumble their way through life and figure things out. That's normal. That's the normal and natural progress, right? Or process, rather. So we're going to make mistakes. So another perception as to why in these stories the parent figure dies off, or the hero becomes orphaned, maybe because if they performed that one necessary step for that child, if they mirrored back that child's existence, then their job's done. That role is no longer needed in these stories. That may be why. And so the hero is on their own to figure things out. Now, what's interesting is society seems to condition us that that's it. As long as we have birthed and cultivated an ego, a little me, a little I self, then that's all we need. We're good. And that is what is needed to function in this society, right? All alone. And so I think that sometimes we people compensate through engaging in all kind of ego traps that seem to amplify and feed it, you know? Again, we see black and white thinking. We see philosophy and spirituality, books on all that, telling you to kill your ego off. Ego death is good, you know? And then we see society glorifying the ego, and so it splits us into black and white thinking. And so I think sometimes we make the mistake that if we want to be healthy and have self-esteem, then we should feed the ego, you know? And it just kind of doesn't work long, because the ego is considered fragile, and the reason it's considered fragile is because it's meant to be temporary. It's either meant to be temporary, or it's meant to walk through this world alone for a very short temporary time, just like in these stories when the hero, like right before they meet their helper but their parents died off, it's very, very temporary, you know, the way it should be for the little I, ego self, to be alone and to walk through this world alone. It's fragile, it's new, it's like a baby. It's not meant to last long. So of course the ego is going to be fragile. Of course it will. I need to find a little shade here for my sun. So again, both the parent's role of mirroring to their child, you know, that they are here, in fact, in the physical realm and they exist. The parent's role and the little ego, the little I self walking alone, both of those things are meant to be temporary through my lens. And then at the end of these stories, there's typically this grand union or a reunion or a wedding, and it has like these vibes of like a cosmic wedding. It's like a big deal. Usually it's a king and a queen, or a prince and a princess, or something. It's meant to be that, have that kind of energy, like a really big deal, you know? Yeah. So at this point, what we see is that the relationship between the hero and the helper is what takes the lead role, okay? And that relationship is what is meant to be permanent. That is what is birthed. Again, you know, in Christianity, it's the concept of birth and rebirth, or to be reborn. So you might look at it through this lens as the birth of the ego, right? Which is meant to be temporary, and you're supposed to stumble. Then you're supposed to find your helper. But there may be multiple helpers, like in these stories. You may meet your counterpart, you know, or whatever it is, your best friend. goes through this whole life with you from that point forward, whatever. But ultimately, it's supposed to be the grand union or relationship here that's meant to be permanent. So the steps to, if you're making notes, number 1, the new child is mirrored by their parent to prove their existence. That births the ego. That's step number 2. That's the result of number 1. The third stage is that the ego struggles alone. It's very, very temporary. And then the ego, number 4, joins the helper in a student type role. Okay, the helper is the one in the lead role, teaching and guiding and leading the student who is in a humble position, the hero. Number 5, the relationship between the two is tested and strengthened. Okay, not the hero, but the relationship is tested and strengthened. And then therefore, at the end, number 6, the relationship is solidified. Okay, and then just to finish this off, a lot of times in these stories, this couple, it's oftentimes, a couple, they meet each other as helpers, each other's helpers usually, or sometimes in these stories, not always. And then there's a birth of a child, and the child is symbolic of our second birth, our rebirth, which is not the birth of the ego, but the birth of the spirit, being born again, but this time spiritually. It's like starting from the spiritual realm. God said, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb, and then you're birthed into the ego, the physical realm, and then you're birthed into the spiritual realm. And I know we could consider that as death, but what's that old saying? The key is to die before you die. Kind of like that. So I hope this has been interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm burning up in my coat. The sun's coming in my Jeep. I have to take this thing off down here in the south. You just never know. You might wake up and it's like wintertime, and then a couple hours later it's summer. You have to dress in layers. But I hope that you are enjoying your day. I hope that you have a wonderful day. I can't wait a minute more to get this thing off. Thanks so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.